Hello, everyone. Welcome to Inside Orbit. I want you to picture this. You are standing in your living room, and you are just staring at it.
Staring at what, exactly?
Well, maybe it's like a dusty acoustic guitar sitting in the corner.
Ugh.
Its strings totally untouched for
Oh,
months.
yeah. We all have one of those.
Right. Or maybe it's an unopened Spanish language book sitting on your nightstand. Or perhaps it's a half-finished coding course open in some forgotten tab on your browser.
The dreaded forgotten tab.
Exactly. You look at it and you feel this incredibly heavy mix of deep, genuine desire to learn, combined with just a profound, almost paralyzing discouragement.
Like you really want the skill, but the mountain just looks way too high.
Yeah, the mountain is terrifying. Which brings us to a rather provocative question for today's deep dive. What if most people fail before they even truly begin?
It is such a universal feeling. I mean, we all have that dusty guitar or that metaphorical uncreased book.
We really do.
And the weight of it, like the guilt of it, is tied to this assumption we all carry about how learning actually works. We view learning as this colossal, life-altering commitment.
We do, and that's exactly why we went deep into the neuroscience and rapid learning research for this deep dive. We wanted to figure out why this happens.
Right, looking under the hood of human cognition.
Exactly, to understand why starting feels so impossible. And more importantly, how we can completely bypass that feeling. Because, we compiled this fascinating stack of sources for today.
Oh, yeah, we've got neuroscientists like Laura Boyd and Lila Landowski.
Plus rapid learning experts like Josh Kaufman and Scott H. Young, and cognitive learning researchers. And the evidence from all of them suggests we are going to completely dismantle the belief that learning a new skill takes years.
Which is a huge promise.
It is. But by the end of this deep dive, you will understand the psychology, the neuroscience, and the exact framework to go from absolute zero to functionally competent in just 20 hours.
Which I know sounds like an exaggeration, or maybe like a late-night infomercial promise.
Buy now for just $19.99.
Right, exactly. But it is deeply rooted in how the brain actually processes information. Though, to understand how we can achieve functional competence in just 20 hours, we first have to understand why society thoroughly convinced us that we need a lifetime to do it.
Yeah, where did that societal programming even come from? Because it feels like a universal truth that mastery requires endless suffering.
It really comes down to a massive game of societal telephone.
Oh, you mean with Malcolm Gladwell?
Yes, the famous 10,000-hour rule. Gladwell popularized this idea in his book Outliers, but the original research he cited was conducted by Dr. K. Anders Ericsson.
Okay.
And here is the crucial detail that just totally got lost in translation over the years. Ericsson's research was specifically about reaching the absolute pinnacle of ultra-competitive fields.
Right.
He was studying PGA Tour golfers, grandmaster chess players, and Olympic-level musicians. He was looking at world-class, top 1% mastery.
So he was absolutely not studying what it takes to learn a new hobby or acquire a professional skill for your resume.
Not at all. And that distinction changes everything.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because there is an ocean of difference between world-class mastery and functional capacity.
A massive difference.
Like if your goal is to beat Tiger Woods at the Masters, then yeah, clear your calendar for the next decade. You absolutely need 10,000 hours. Right. But if your goal is just to play a decent round of golf with your friends, not embarrass yourself and actually enjoy a sunny afternoon, that is functional capacity. That does not take a decade.
No, it doesn't. But the tragedy is that because the 10,000-hour rule became this cultural monolith, we internalize the idea that any meaningful learning requires a grueling, years-long commitment.
Which is so discouraging.
It is. So when we sit down with that batar, we are already deeply intimidated by an imaginary mountain. And building on that intimidation, rapid learning expert Josh Kaufman argues that the true barrier to learning isn't intellectual capacity at all.
Really? Then what is it?
It is entirely emotional. He calls it the frustration barrier.
The frustration barrier. Wow, what a perfect name for the villain of this story.
Right.
Because, let's be honest, adults absolutely hate feeling incompetent. What if the hardest part of learning is simply surviving those first few hours?
He usually is.
Because children don't seem to mind it, They just play through the clumsiness, they fall down, they laugh, they get back up. But as adults, our egos are incredibly fragile. Feeling stupid just does not feel good.
It feels awful. And that intense emotional friction, that literal feeling of, I am terrible at this, is exactly where most people quit.
They just drop the guitar.
Exactly. They interpret that uncomfortable feeling as a sign that they lack natural talent, when in reality, it is just the mandatory entry fee for acquiring a new skill.
But, I mean, it's one thing to say embrace the mistakes, but sitting down and actually doing it is agonizing. How do we prevent ourselves from just walking away the second that frustration hits?
Well, we have to look at what's happening biologically.
Because I hear you saying mistakes are a biological necessity. But practically speaking, when I hit a wrong chord or write broken code, my brain doesn't feel receptive to change. It feels like it's shutting down. Why does the biology feel so contradictory to the emotional experience?
That is the ultimate paradox of learning, and it is where the work of neuroscientists like Leela Landowski and Laura Boyd is so illuminating.
They study neuroplasticity, right?
Yes, which is the brain's ability to physically change its structure in response to experience. So short-term, it changes chemically, and long-term, it changes structurally.
Okay.
When you mess up, you feel a spike of stress. That stress is accompanied by the release of neuromodulators in your brain, specifically one called acetylcholine.
Wait, so making a mistake and feeling that spike of anxiety is actually a good thing? Like it's a chemical wash?
It is an evolutionary alarm bell. Acetylcholine acts like a spotlight in your brain. It drastically increases your focused attention. Your nervous system is essentially saying, hey, something just went wrong here. Pay close attention so we can fix it to survive. It feels bad because alarms are supposed to feel bad. If an alarm was soothing, you would ignore it.
That makes so much sense. I love thinking about it with an analogy. Like learning a new skill isn't like downloading a file to your laptop.
Right, where a progress bar just smoothly goes from 0 to 100 in the background while you drink coffee.
Exactly. It's not passive. It is more like bushwhacking a brand new trail through a dense, overgrown forest. You have to hack away the branches, you get scratched up, you sweat, and you face terrible resistance. But that resistance is the path being made.
The bushwhacking analogy captures the biology perfectly, because what's fascinating here is that the release of acetylcholine literally opens a window for neuroplasticity.
The window actually opens when you feel bad.
Yes. Your brain becomes highly receptive to structural change right after you make a mistake and feel that intense frustration.
Oh, man. So if you put the guitar down the moment you feel that anxiety,
You are slamming the window of neuroplasticity shut right when it is primed to do the heavy lifting. You are biologically training your nervous system to be less able to cope with failure in the future.
which perfectly explains the trap that so many of us fall into. If bushwhacking and struggling is the only way the brain changes structurally, it explains why eager learners spend all their time just reading maps of the forest instead of actually walking into the trees.
Yep. We stay in the safe zone.
We really do. We buy the books, we watch endless YouTube tutorials, we scroll through subreddits, but we don't actually pick up the guitar or write a single line of code.
Because reading about it is safe. It doesn't trigger acetylcholine. It doesn't trigger the frustration barrier.
It's comfortable.
Exactly. Cognitive learning researcher Justin Sung calls this theory overload. And he notes that relying heavily on theory has an almost 100% failure rate.
100%.
Almost, yeah. People trick themselves into thinking they are making progress because they are consuming information, but they are just engaging in passive learning.
It is the illusion of progress. You feel incredibly productive sitting on your couch watching a video about guitar theory, but your brain isn't actually bushwhacking any new trails.
To see how damaging this illusion is, we can look at the data from Sung's learning programs. He tracked students to see how theory versus practice actually played out in real life.
Oh, this is the Enzo and Suresh case study.
Yes. There was one student, Suresh, who plowed through 31% of the program's complex theory in just 5 weeks.
Wow, that's fast.
It is. He was consuming textbooks, watching lectures, just rapidly stockpiling information. Another student, Enzo, took a completely different approach. He only covered 20% of the material, but he stretched it over 54 weeks.
Wait, only 20% over an entire year? So how was Enzo spending his time if he wasn't reading the material?
Enzo would read a tiny fraction of the theory and then immediately plunge into practicing it. He would struggle, he would fail, he would trigger that acetylcholine, and he would take breaks.
Okay, so he was actually doing the thing.
Yes. And the results were staggering. Suresh completely failed to acquire the skill despite reading way more of the curriculum. Enzo succeeded at a very high level.
That is wild.
The psychological mechanism behind why Suresh failed is tied to a concept called multiple element interactivity.
Can we break that down? What does multiple element interactivity actually feel like for a beginner who is just trying to learn?
Think about the very first time you sat behind the steering wheel of a car. You had to consciously think about the pressure of your foot on the brake, the angle of the rear view mirror, the position of your hands on the wheel, the cars in the next lane, the speed limit.
Turn signals, the radio, everything.
Yes, exactly. Those are all separate elements interacting at once. For a beginner, your working memory is instantly maxed out just trying to manage those 5 or 6 things.
Right.
A master driver, however, subconsciously groups all those elements together into one automated action. They just drive to the store while listening to the radio.
So if Suresh is reading advanced theory about 15 different steering techniques and defensive driving maneuvers without ever getting behind the wheel, his brain simply crashes when he finally tries to do it all at once.
Exactly. It is cognitive overload. Your brain only has so many resources, and that overload prevents any structural neuroplasticity from occurring.
Yeah.
You cannot wire a network that is overloaded.
I saw a term in the research notes that I think connects beautifully here. The monitor hypothesis from linguistics.
Oh, yes. That's a great connection.
The idea is that you only need just enough theory to be able to self-correct your own mistakes. You don't need a PhD in music theory to play a pop song.
Right.
You just need to know enough to hear when a note sounds sour so your brain can say, move your finger up a fret.
That's spot on. And Justin Sung suggests a powerful ratio to enforce this. For every 1 hour of theory you consume, you need to spend 5 hours actually practicing it.
Wow. 1 to 5.
Yeah. If you watch a 10-minute video on a coding concept, you owe the universe 50 minutes of writing terrible, broken code until it works.
So what does this all mean for us practically? We know we need to practice 5 times more than we read, and we know we have to embrace the anxiety of the frustration barrier.
Right.
But we cannot just flail around aimlessly in the forest. Just struggling for the sake of struggling isn't efficient either. How do we actually structure this time so we don't just, burn out?
This is where Josh Kaufman's 20-hour framework becomes incredibly practical. The very first step is to set a specific target performance level.
Okay, target performance.
You cannot say, I want to learn to program. That is a massive, vague goal, and vague goals are a recipe for getting lost. You have to say, I want to build a specific web application that tracks my daily coffee expenses.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
There's a psychological comfort in vague goals, isn't there?
Oh, definitely.
Like you can never truly fail at learning French because there's no finish line. It's a safe, ego-protecting goal. But setting a specific target, like I want to have a 3-minute conversation with a barista in Paris, is vulnerable.
Very vulnerable.
You either do it or you don't.
And that vulnerability forces action. Once you have that specific target, you move to the second step of the framework, which is deconstruction.
Breaking it down?
Exactly. Every skill is actually just a bundle of microscopic subskills. Golf isn't one skill. It's driving off the tee, putting, chipping out of the sand, reading the green. You have to break the massive skill down into its smallest workable parts.
And there's a phenomenal technique for this mentioned in the source. It's called Imagine Disaster.
I love this one.
It's so good. You basically ask yourself, what is the absolute minimum level of skill I need to avoid total disaster or complete embarrassment?
Right, the absolute baseline.
Like, if you are learning the guitar to play at a campfire, the disaster is sitting there not knowing any songs. So you don't start by learning complex jazz scales.
No, please don't.
You learn 4 basic chords, G, C, D, and E minor. Those 4 chords alone will allow you to play thousands of popular songs. You practice the sub-skills that give you the highest immediate return on investment.
Deconstruction makes the mountain look like a staircase. And once you have identified those crucial first sub-skills, you arrive at the most vital step of the entire 20-hour framework. Pre-commitment.
Pre-commitment, meaning committing before you start.
Yes. You must explicitly pre-commit to completing 20 hours of practice before you are allowed to evaluate whether you are good at the skill or whether you want to quit.
20 hours,
Yeah.
which honestly sounds like a hefty chunk of time. But when you break the math down, it is roughly 45 minutes a day for a month.
Exactly. The pre-commitment is essentially a psychological trick to outsmart your own biology because we know the frustration barrier is coming.
Oh, it's definitely coming.
We know that by hour 3 of those 20 hours, you're going to feel incredibly stupid. Acetylcholine is going to flood your system, and every evolutionary instinct will scream at you to put the guitar down and walk away.
But if you have pre-committed to 20 hours,
you remove the negotiation entirely. You don't have to sit there debating whether you have natural talent. You just look at the clock, realize you are only at hour 4, and keep practicing.
it is a line in the sand. It forces you to survive the steepest, ugliest part of the learning curve.
It really does.
So let's say you were doing it. You're putting in the 45 minutes a day. You are hitting the frustration barrier. Your brain is flooded with acetylcholine, and you are hacking away at the trail.
Oh.
What happens when those 45 minutes are up?
Well,
Because the research suggests the actual biological magic of solidifying a skill doesn't happen while you are actively sweating. It happens when you stop.
here's where it gets really interesting. This might be the most counterintuitive insight from all the neuroscience data. We live in a culture that glorifies the grind.
Right. Hustle culture
Exactly. The idea of pushing harder, staying up later, continuously grinding, but continuous unbroken practice actually destroys learning.
destroys it.
Yes. When you learn something new and you trigger neuroplasticity, that new information is encoded in your neural networks, but it is highly unstable.
So if I practice a new chord progression on the guitar for an hour, and then I put the guitar down and immediately try to do my taxes or answer highly demanding emails, what happens to that unstable network?
You trigger a phenomenon called retrograde interference.
Retrograde interference.
Right. The heavy new cognitive load of doing your taxes essentially wipes out the fragile new neural connections you just built playing the guitar. You overwrite the data before it can save to the hard drive.
Oh, man. You literally pave over the fresh trail you just bushwhacked before the dirt has a chance to settle.
That's a perfect way to picture it. To protect those new connections, neuroscientist Lila Landowski emphasizes that you must take a 10 to 20-minute break of completely mindless activity immediately after an intense practice session.
Mindless activity, like what?
You need to go for a walk without your phone, stare out the window, do the dishes. You have to let the nervous system calm down so the connections can stabilize and take root.
And that stabilization process doesn't just stop when we do the dishes, right? It goes into absolute overdrive when we go to sleep.
Yes, sleep is paramount.
Josh Kaufman shared an incredible personal story about this when he was testing his own framework. He decided to relearn how to touch type using a completely different keyboard layout.
Oh, the Colmac layout.
Yeah, the Colmac layout instead of the standard QWERTY we all use.
Yeah.
For the first 2 hours, he was in pure, unadulterated agony. He went from typing 60 words a minute to literally 5 words a minute.
Ouch.
Right? He was making so many mistakes, he joked that he was going to break the backspace key.
I mean, typing 5 words a minute as an adult who knows how to type is the ultimate frustration barrier. His brain must have been swimming in acetylcholine.
Totally flooded. He pushed through the session, but what he noticed was fascinating. The most dramatic leaps in his typing speed didn't happen while his fingers were actually on the keys.
Really?
Yeah, he would struggle through a 45-minute session, hit a wall where he simply couldn't type any faster, and then he would just go to sleep for the night. When he woke up the next morning and sat back down at the keyboard, he was drastically improved.
Overnight.
Overnight. He was making fewer mistakes and typing significantly faster without any additional conscious effort.
What Kaufman experienced is why we need to completely change how we view rest. Sleep is not a break from learning. Sleep is the active completion of the learning process.
It's doing the work for you.
Exactly. During deep sleep, your brain replays the neural firing patterns of the exact skill you practiced earlier that day. It replays them at lightning speed, consolidating and encoding the struggle into permanent structural changes.
It is like your brain's overnight IT department, defragmenting the hard drive, organizing the files, and installing the new software while you are unconscious.
That's exactly what it's doing. If we connect this to the bigger picture, there is an amazing real-world application of this in corporate Japan.
Oh, I read about this in the notes.
Yeah, some Japanese business managers are actually given sleeping bags to keep under their desks in the office.
That is amazing.
The protocol is to intensely discuss a complex problem, brainstorm ideas, max out their cognitive load, and then immediately get into the sleeping bag for a nap.
They just go right to sleep.
Right. And when they wake up, the brain has consolidated the scattered information, and they often have the solution ready. The intensity of the practice, combined with immediate deep rest, equals rapid learning.
Wow. So, if we look at the entire journey we've taken today, we have completely dismantled the Gladwell myth. You don't need a decade to become functional.
No, 10,000 hours is for mastery.
Right. And we've seen that the frustration you feel isn't a lack of talent, it is just acetylcholine priming your brain for brilliance.
It's just biology.
We've learned that we have to avoid the safe illusion of theory overload by practicing 5 times more than we read. We know how to deconstruct this skill to avoid disaster, pre-commit to 20 hours to remove our ego from the equation, and protect our progress with mindless breaks and deep sleep.
It is a complete paradigm shift. It takes the abstract, deeply intimidating concept of mastery and replaces it with a concrete biological roadmap to functional capacity.
And so I want to turn this directly to you, the listener. Think about that one skill you have been putting off for years.
Mhm.
The one you convinced yourself you simply didn't have the time, the youth, or the natural talent to pursue.
We all have one.
We do. Maybe it is coding an app, maybe it is speaking Spanish, maybe it is finally learning to play that dusty acoustic guitar in the corner of your living room. You now know that the steep, ugly, uncomfortable part of the learning curve is a feature, not a bug.
Exactly.
That feeling of being an awkward, clumsy beginner is the exact biological state required to change your brain.
You do not need 10,000 hours.
Yeah.
You don't need to quit your job, move to a mountain, or alter the course of your life to become a beginner again.
What if the only thing standing between you and a completely different future, like a completely new identity as someone who speaks that language or plays that instrument, is just 45 minutes a day for the next 30 days? That dusty guitar is waiting for you. The window of neuroplasticity is yours to open.
Which leaves us with one final thought to consider today. If everything we've discussed is true, if the brain requires the messy, uncomfortable freedom to make mistakes in order to physically grow, how does that reflect on how we are taught?
Oh, that's a profound point. If the traditional school system is built almost entirely on theory overload, hours of passive listening, reading, and testing, with almost zero tolerance for clumsy, failing mistakes, are we raising a generation biologically blocked from actually learning?
It really makes you wonder.
It's definitely something to think about the next time you feel embarrassed for not getting something right on the first try. Embrace the frustration, take a nap, and watch what happens. Until our next deep dive, keep learning and keep exploring your orbit.